Good morning. I am only a couple of minutes earlier today because, believe it or not, I couldn't find my phone stand, so I couldn't prop my phone. But here I am now. We'll tag everybody as usual. Good morning, John. Good morning, Gina. Good morning, Ari. Good morning, Mary. It is 7:30 in Kojimal, but let's give it another minute because I came on so late. Let me tag everybody. John says, for the record, I'm feeling strong and grateful for all the good energy from the Sangha. Sangha is a spiritual community. Thank you, John. I so feel the same way. I'm so glad to hear you're feeling good. Good morning, Sandra. All right, guys, let's start. In the past couple of days, well, more like a week, that I wasn't feeling well with COVID and migraine, I somehow naturally made a detour away from Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart and onto to less complicated matters, which to me is quite interesting and wonderful at the same time. Don't you think it's kind of cool that when challenged physically, mentally, emotionally, we all default to things that our brain, body, and heart consider simple? And since I could so viscerally connect with this need for simplicity in the past week, I realized even better how important this embodied life exploration is for all of us. Because, at least for me, it's not a default yet. And by talking about it, exploring all these emotional experiences together, hearing your take on it, creating meditative practices that support our explorations, we make this type of processing of information, embodied processing, a norm for ourselves, something that we default to, something that our system considers simple. So we make it something that later on our body, brain, and heart will default to whenever the need arises. So anyway, this was my big insight during this week. But without further ado, I'd like to talk about shame a little more today. This is the subject that we kind of dropped last week. We already started on it last week, discovering that all of us experience shame. And I repeat, all of us, without any exception. And if we think we don't experience shame, we are just not digging deep enough. And yet, it is absolutely necessary to uncover and heal our shame, this deeply rooted emotion, if we want to step into our full potential. Because if we don't do it, at some point, it will come up in a challenging situation, and then it will be much more challenging to deal with it. Before we dive into our practice today, let's talk a little bit about shame in the Western culture, because of course it's quite different from what is happening in the East. Brené Brown writes, one reason we get so confused about the term shame and what it means is that we misuse it all the time. People throw around the word shameless when someone makes a self-serving or unethical decision. They attribute unconscionable behavior to a lack of shame. Brené Brown says this is wrong and it is dangerous. Shame isn't the cure, it's the cause. Don't let what looks like a bloated ego and narcissism fool you into thinking there is a lack of shame there. Shame and fear are almost always driving that unethical behavior. I'll repeat that. Shame and fear are almost always driving any unethical behavior. We are now seeing that shame often fuels narcissistic behavior. In fact, Brené Brown defines narcissism as the shame-based fear of being ordinary. Narcissism is a shame-based fear of being ordinary. Interesting, isn't it? Grandiosity and bluster are easy to assign to an overinflated ego. It's tough to get a glimpse of the fear and lack of self-worth that are actually behind this posturing and selfishness, because posturing leads to weaponizing hurt and turning it on to other people. More accountability for their behavior and lack of empathy is needed. More shame just makes them more dangerous, gives them the opportunity to redirect attention to the shaming behavior, and weirdly can drum up support from others who are also looking for a way of discharge for their pain and an enemy to blame. Shame is not a compass for moral behavior, is much more likely to drive destructive, hurtful, immoral, and self-aggrandizing behavior than it is to heal it. Why? Because where shame exists, empathy is almost always absent. Where shame exists, empathy is almost always absent. That's what makes shame dangerous. The opposite of experiencing shame is experiencing empathy. The behavior that many of us find so egregious today is more about people being lacking empathy, not shameless. I find it really fascinating and interesting discovery. So what we feel is a shameless behavior. Brené Brown says, actually, this type of behavior is very much driven by shame. We just can't see it behind all the bells and whistles of this posturing. Anyway, as a practice today, let's look at the 4 elements of shame resilience. These 4 elements are defined by Brené Brown in her book, Atlas of the Heart. I'm gonna read through a passage from her book, and you're gonna just scan and rescan your body, noticing how these concepts, these questions resonate through your body. As always, take a comfortable position and take a few moments to settle in. Scan your body, notice what's present for you right now, emotionally, physically, mentally. How are you right now? Let your breath be easy, soft. Don't try to control it. See if you can observe your breath from the very beginning when you take in the air in front of your nose, making it your breath, to the moment when you exhale, merging your breath back into the atmosphere. If you want to, you can close your eyes. If you want to, you can put one hand on your heart, the other on your belly, or do whatever feels good for you right now. And again, as I read through the following passages, the 4 elements of shame resilience according to Brené Brown, simply notice how the words and concepts resonate with you viscerally in your body, what thoughts that provoke, what emotions arise. Brené Brown says that across their research, the participants who could move through shame without sacrificing their values and authenticity shared 4 practices when overcoming shame. They reverse engineered how these people worked through shame to come up with a process that all of us can use. And these steps rarely happen in any particular order. They just all need to happen for us to develop resilience to shame. So even though I'm going to read it as 1 through 4, it doesn't mean that this is the order of steps. Number 1, recognizing shame and understanding its triggers. So can you right now physically recognize the grip of shame for whatever it is? Can you name it? Can you feel your way through it without running away? And can you figure out what messages and expectations triggered this particular flavor of shame in you? Of course, in this step, mindfulness is very important. We simply cannot pretend that shame isn't happening, which is quite easy when experiencing shame. So in this step, just allow yourself to connect with this very uncomfortable experience of shame. Very uneasy physical sensations. And try not to fixate on blaming. Oh, I'm so bad, I'm so stupid. Because then you're actually getting away from shame and into this blaming game. Can you stay with your shame, whatever it is, for just a few moments, allowing this uncomfortable, uneasy sensation to be in your body? For bonus points, name the trigger. The second step in shame resilience is practicing critical awareness. Can you reality check the messages and expectations that are driving your shame? Are they realistic? Are they attainable? Are they what you want to be or what you think others need or want from you? In other words, how true is it? So staying with your shame that you identified in the stage 1, staying with it quite viscerally, naming the trigger, the situation, why the shame arises. Check the messages and expectations that brought the shame on to see if they are realistic, if they are attainable, if you even want them to be your benchmark for your behavior. Number 3 in the shame resilience methodology is reaching out. Here, instead of cocooning your shame inside this hard shell, can you really own the story of your shame? Can you share it? Because remember, the antidote to shame is empathy. And we cannot experience empathy if we're not connecting, if we're not sharing, if we're not reaching out. Yes, it is difficult, it is shameful to admit certain things, but only if we share and connect, we can start healing. So can you, in this very moment, set an intention to reach out to a trusted person, to connect with them deeply, sharing your flavor of shame, so that you can receive the empathy you deserve. And number 4 on this list is speaking shame. Again, for shame resilience practice. You have to talk about how you feel and ask for what you need when you feel shame. Because silence, secrecy, and judgment only fuel shame. When you are alone with your shame, you feel like nobody else does this or feels this or is this way, only you. And that is so far from the truth. Remember, all of us experience shame, all of us, without any exception. So based on this mental understanding, please be sure to speak your shame, whatever it is, however awful it feels for you. And it doesn't mean that you have to shout it from every corner. Maybe you need to find a professional to speak about it. Maybe it's a trusted friend. Maybe it's our circle. Maybe it's just your journal as a first step. But it needs to be expressed. Otherwise, healing cannot start. So let me reiterate the 4 factors for shame resilience. Recognizing shame, understanding its triggers, practicing critical awareness, meaning reality check. Is it attainable? Are those expectations realistic? Do you even want them? Speaking shame and reaching out to receive empathy. If you practice these steps all together or one at a time, you'll be sure to start healing your shame little by little. And once you do, this is when you open to step into your full potential, knowing that there is nothing that can stop you. You can do, be, or have anything you want. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a beautiful day, and I will see you tomorrow.